Hello everyone, and welcome back to Reviews with Tyberius D. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite characters that I've ever had to deal with, whether it was in gaming or science fiction or just in general, and that is former Master of the Jedi Order, great Sith Lord, and person who went their own way. We're going to be talking about Kreia. Roll the intro. All right, it's good to see everyone here. We're streaming at the weirdest time ever, so there's not going to be a lot of people in the chat. But I did post up the announcement, so anyone who is available will be rolling in sooner or later. The problem is that one, we've done this episode before, so I'm sure a few people are going to be like, "What? Why are you doing this again?" The other side of that is that I am streaming at like 10 a.m., which is really weird because I've been trying to. Was trying to. Do this last night, but I've been getting up at like 5 a.m. every day, and it's just been weird. So without further ado, Goldar in the chat, great to see you. Today we're going to be talking about Kreia, and the reason why we're doing this over again is because while I will do things to get them done, there are times where I do not like what the final product has been, and I go for a recall or redo, and so I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. So today, I have spent hours and hours getting together this little presentation on Kreia and talking about her. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any visual aids, but we do have sound aids, and we'll be hearing from the great master herself and what is going on and why she thinks of what she is. And I've got this nice little thing going on here as far as where I want to take it. So the first question really begins with, who is Kreia? Who is this person that we're talking about? Well, before I really want to get into it myself, I'm going to let her say who she is. So, without further ado, let's listen in the first part.
What do you wish to hear? That I once believed in the code of the Jedi? That I felt the call of the Sith? That perhaps once I held the galaxy by its throat? That for every good work that I did, I brought equal harm upon the galaxy? That perhaps what the greatest of the Sith Lords knew of evil they learned from me? What would it matter now? There is only so much comfort in knowing such things, and it is not who I am now.
Now, obviously, this is later on towards her life, and there's a big question about what is going on at this point. Now, of course, where you meet her is in Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords. And you'll explore quite a bit about her as it goes on, but the majority of her early life is very much disputed in what is going on. But I also wanted to get in with this one, which I thought I should have opened up with, but I got the order a little wrong, so I apologize.
I am but a mirror, whose only purpose is to show you what your own eyes cannot yet see.
So, we are talking about somebody that feels that they are very wise, very competent, and very confident in who they are, and while that there are phases in their life story that they're willing to say that that is not me anymore, they realize the entirety of the whole. And so, for a lot of people, this character is very wise and fully realized. And while a lot of people do not agree with Kreia in her philosophical takes, especially some of the more darker ones, I find her to be quite compelling personally, and I believe that my own personal philosophy and psychology does reflect in a lot of her teachings. But as far as those teachings, let's get into a little bit of what she does teach and why she does teach them. And some of these are really, basic, so I'll give you like just a couple of things to throw out here. The first lesson I'll throw at you is just her thoughts on ideologues, and that one's a really good one, so here we go.
Habat has an agenda, and he hopes to tie you into it to use you to his own ends. Its speech is filled with maybes and perhaps. It makes promises of healing, while the world under its care burns and dies. You should heed my advice. It would be best if you avoided such needless entanglements.
And I love this because this is definitively true of so many ideologues, is that they are on these great moral crusades to make the world better, but do they actually live the principles in which they are advocating? And many of them don't. Many of them are obsessed with power and obsessed with the means of power. And particularly if we get into our modern politics, which I'm going to bring that up a little bit, sorry, is that whether they are left or right or what have you, more people are concerned with playing the game of power in politics and the fear of others having power than they are necessarily about using that power for the ideals that they have. The vast majority of the time is that, at least if you look at it in a more personal point of view, at least in the way that I see it, is that most people have power usually to protect themselves or to avoid the power of others. And we'll definitely be getting into that because she has a lot of lessons on power that I want to talk about and get into. But it's very much very poignant in this regard, is that ideologues do not tend to follow what they actually preach, and there's a lot of people that fall into that area. Another one, though, that I want to fall into is very related, and that's basically titles and factionhood. You know, who are you and what part of factions that you have, and so take it away.
Does it matter? Of course it does. Such titles allow you to break the galaxy into light and dark, categorize it. Perhaps I am neither, and I hold both as what they are, pieces of a whole.
And I absolutely love this because a lot of what this teaches is that, you know, whether you are, example, I'm going to get political because it's something I deal with a lot, and I'm not trying to make a political thing on the review show, but that's kind of what everyone knows me for. If you're a Republican or a Democrat, usually you have some ideals that you usually seek out, and it's easy to divide the world based on good and evil. Like, hey, you know, I'm a Republican, you're a Republican too, cool, we're the good guys. Or, you know, Democrats do the same thing, right? And that's fine. But the problem is that what a lot of this misses, and one of the best reasons why I love Kreia, and we'll definitely get into this when the more the lessons that we get into, is that she sees things for the greater whole that they tend to be. Is that without one, you don't tend to have the other, and without the one or without the other, the core that you build yourself around usually lacks its meaning. And so to have these ideologies and to have these principles means to realize the full half. And I didn't have this in the recordings, and I really wanted to do it. But I'll just put it simply as this, is that Kreia believes that to believe in something is to know when and how to betray it. Is that if you're not willing to break with your beliefs and your morals and your principles, that eventually, at some point, it will put you in a cage. And she'll definitely talk about this to some degree. But that particular snippet I couldn't find of hers. And I was looking for forever. And I put the better part of 3 hours into this, just putting this all together. So yeah, even I miss some spots, but I love Kreia's character because she's literally one of the most well-rounded and wisest characters, because she definitely gives you the sense that while she will look at things in a very particular way, is that she does see things for a more all-encompassing view, that there is very few good guys and bad guys in the universe, and there's very few people that are, you know, good or moral, and we'll definitely be getting into that. But there are just people. There are actors, and I love this. The Purple Project. Hey, we haven't seen you for a bit, man. It's good to see you. Kreia is my favorite character from any narrative story ever. Had to jump in. Well, I'm glad to have you, because we actually tried to do this episode before, but it didn't go as well as I wanted it to. So it's good to have you in chat, and I'd love for you to talk about this as we go along. But without further ado, we talked about ideologies, we talked about factions, so let's talk about strength and the real lessons that she gets into regarding that strength. The first thing, foremost, is what she thinks of as true strength, which I absolutely agree with. So, and this one's really short, so here we go.
And know that that is the true lesson of strength, to turn away from strength that is not your own.
Okay. Pretty basic, pretty simple. Now, that could mean a lot of things. Turn away from strength that isn't your own. Well, what does that mean exactly? Well, we'll be getting into this with the other forms of strength here in just a second. But what she's going to advocate, and that there was a few instances that were in the narrative of the games, but I couldn't really dig it out without making it sound incoherent of a mess, is that you have the power to rely upon others. You have the power to use the power of others. And there's actually quite a bit of narrative things where I could have took some absurd sin and put it in. But the problem with that is that it was more reliant, and it sounded really bad for the way that she was trying to frame it in the context of it. And so, without context, without narrative, um, give me just a second here. Without context, without narrative, it either sounds really bad or really off-putting, and it's not what the message I think that's trying to be conveyed here. Kreia is trying to say that you have strength, that you could take the strength of others, but that strength is not true strength. Because, as an example, one of the great lessons in Nar Shaddaa is that when you have the ability to use your strength, you have one of two options. You can use strength, or your own strength, to reward yourself, or you can go helping about others. And we'll get into altruism and cruelty here before too long, because I definitely want to get into it. But there's a really good method that really points this out, and that is dealing with the exchange on Nar Shaddaa, which is basically a bunch of illegal, illicit activities that go from everything from carteling drugs to slave trade to all this other stuff, and you could work for them. But here's the funny part. Towards the end of that storyline is that the exchange uses their money and their wealth to purchase the power of mercenaries, and it is shown towards the end of the storyline that money and wealth and power really isn't power, because it's not strength. Because what it is that it's influence, and you can use that influence to use the strength of others, but once people use their strength against you, it's pretty much over, because you can buy strength, but if you have none to your own, you are not strong at all. And we'll definitely be talking quite a bit about that in the usage of strength going further, but I want to talk more about the forms of strength and what that actually means, because strength is not solely one thing.
Explain something to me. Well, Jedi are supposed to be tough, capable.
Yes, and what are they without the Force? Take the greatest Jedi Knight, strip away the Force, and what remains? They rely on it, depend on it more than they know. Watch as one tries to hold a blaster, as they try to hold a lightsaber, and you will see nothing more than a woman, or a man, a child.
I guess I didn't realize how much they relied on it.
Do not be surprised. In many ways, even you are more capable than a Jedi. You could survive where they could not, simply because you do not hear the Force as they do. It is irony of a sort.
And I love this excerpt, absolutely, because it shows, and she's conveying, and there's a few more excerpts that I could have brought in there, that strength has many forms. You could be physically strong. You could be intellectually strong. You could be a great debater. You could be, excuse me. Yeah, you could be a great debater. You could be, excuse me. Yeah, you could be physically strong. You could be intellectually strong. You could be emotionally strong. You can be... There is as many forms of strength in the universe as there are, stars in the sky. You can test them out that to any kind of different form. But to get into the Purple Project, this game is fantastic. Absolutely agree. I didn't have it shape my morality as a young teen because I didn't really play the game until later on. But as a sense here is that the more that I actually did learn about the storyline, the more that I did it, the more that I identified with it very, very well. And understanding the the philosophies that were behind it, particularly with the video, which is The Philosophy of Kreia. And if anyone hasn't watched it, please go check that out on YouTube. It's absolutely fantastic. I might even try to remember to put that in the outro, just like, hey, go check out this video. This video is fantastic. Without further ado, though, is that, yeah, your own personal will is the greatest strength in the universe. Ooh, okay, fair enough. We'll get there. Go ahead and roll the clip.
All that strength, that anger, yet it is held in check, restrained by his beliefs, his doubt. Everyone is made up of events in their past, and it forms walls around one's spirit, or breaks such walls down. The mind makes some powerless, and gives strength to others. He walks, but he is dead. It is because he is not ready to give up his ties yet. It is much like Jedi who will not give up their code. It is to surrender yourself, to make yourself a slave to a teaching or belief that makes it so that belief will always rule you.
Okay, so yeah, Purple beat me to it, and I'm glad you did, because that is the ultimate lesson that Kreia largely has, is that the ultimate strength in the universe is the human will, the compunction to do things. And that is incredibly powerful. And it's one of those things where she'll teach a lot about morality in this. And some of this gets a little dark, but she largely forgoes the notion of morality entirely. That in this particular thing you can hear about it is that a lot of the times morality and principles to a large degree are nothing more than mental cages to either restrain you or to encage you so that you cannot assert your power into a full sense. Now, that does not mean that she believes that anyone should just go about and doing whatever the hell she wants. She will talk about the echoes of altruism and cruelty and that the ramifications that people have. But what she is trying to convey to everyone is that you are powerful, that I am powerful, and you are powerful, and you have the power to make decisions and to go about the world in basically any way that you desire, and that it will have ramifications going deep into the universe that will shape what it is now and what it is to come. And to some degree, while she doesn't really elaborate on this, you are shaped by the actions that have brought you here. The things that people have decided to do beforehand has helped shape the person that you are. And that reverberates through time as well. And so every action has an outcome. And we'll be getting that to in just a second. But yes, I definitely wanted to get into the will. And so when it comes to that, I apologize. I want to hit this one, which is really profound stuff. Great analysis. Yes, I love this. And I love this character. She's absolutely fantastic. But, so, what does Kreia think about power? How does she feel about it? Well, I want to get into this a little bit because this is a major plot point for her going into the game that you're going to reference and understand. So, roll this clip.
I wielded power like you cannot imagine. Everything I saw was awash with possibilities, spreading outwards, touching everything else. I saw all of that, all that the Force is. And only when it was ripped from me did I truly see it.
Okay, so there's quite a lot that actually is referenced in there. Not only in like the fact that one can be powerful at a point and not only have that taken away from them or to lose it, but also the value of what you have. Is that many people all know this. You know, I don't need to elaborate on this too much, but most people don't really value what they have until it's gone, and some people don't use it while they have it. Which is why when we get into altruism, she's going to be a little hard on it, because realizing the strength that you have usually needs to come from some kind of action. You have to build that strength up and to learn the value of that strength. And we'll get into that. But I want to get into talking about using your strength, because this is the big things that really she tackled into me and a lot of other people, is how you affect the world around you. You are powerful. And with that power, not necessarily comes responsibility, but comes consequence. Is that you have to realize that when you make actions, is that things can happen. And I absolutely love this. So without further ado, we're going to talk about the echoes of power that builds out. And we'll talk about cruelty first, and what happens to those who, not in a moral sense, act bad. That's what she's not trying to convey that. What she is trying to convey is that when you act in ways of malice, and when you act in ways of, it would largely be considered negative, but basically when you go about trying to serve yourself, you open up the door to cruelty and the paths of destruction. So I've got about 2 or 3 clips here that I want to roll here, and I'll comment as we go on. So, cruelty.
The smallest push, the smallest touch, sends echoes throughout life. These acts of cruelty may have more severe repercussions than you know or can see. Cruelty leads to suffering, and when one suffers, it is the way of life to spread suffering. The suffering within builds until its sound is all one hears. And when a kindness is offered, it is punished, and a greater darkness is served.
Yeah, I want to skip to the next one, but I really got to comment to this, because I'm familiar with pain and suffering. You know, and it's one of those deals where personally, when people tell me, oh, you're privileged, you know, that kind of conversation, which I don't want to get into too much, I get really pissed off. And I don't really take that very well, because while everyone has a different life, is that we can assume that this person has had it better than you do because they may be more wealthy, or they may be excuse me, they may be more prominent, or they may have certain doors open to them that you will not. But it completely ignores the greater viewpoint, the greater gravity, that there will always be doors open to you that other people will never have. And that's not just to say everyone else, but that means other people. And so, to a large extent, the problem that I have here is that people miss the greater picture. That is, when they look at the world, is that they tend to look at it from a point of envy, particularly when people are suffering, as they think that somebody else has it better than them. Well, here's the real honest truth. Everyone has it better than you. But everyone has it less better than you. It is your individual differences that make you who you are and make it your life kind of worth living, because there is no one like you. And I hate to do that whole "you're special" kind of thing, because it drives me nuts, because people have way too much of an inflated self sometimes. But people are special. It is the innate differences on which who you are that makes you who you are. You are no more equal to the person next to you as the person that is furthest from you. Is that the only equality in life, if you will, is that we are all equally unequal. And I hate that, but that is the greater whole of this kind of conversation and this reality that we face, is that when people openly go, hey, should we be treated equally? I'm like, no, we shouldn't. Equality is a joke. The only equality here is that you are different from me, and difference does not equal inferiority or superiority. It means you're different. And that is a large moral axiom that I have, is that when I piss off a lot of people politically here, is that I'm not concerned that you are treated to the same degree that I am, because I don't expect you to. I expect that I'm going to get things better than you do, but you're also going to get things better than I do, because I can be a bit of an asshole, as an example. Well, I'm not the most friendly person to deal with. I don't like people in a general sense. And so, in having that, I'm going to be a lot more stern, and I'm going to be a lot more resilient to the influence of others. And that will open doors for me. That will allow me to go my own way in ways that other people cannot. But on the other side of that is that will close many doors for me too. Because if I need to rely on people to get to a greater end, that door's largely going to be closed, or it's going to be a lot more resistant to me opening it. The other side of that is that, if you're a person that is a lot kinder, that is a lot more open to the influence of others, is that sometimes you're going to pay for that. There's going to be doors closed to you because you will not go the direction that you want to take. That you want to take things. You're going to be subject to the will of others, and you're going to go with the flow more often. But that's going to open up a lot of doors for you, because people will maybe reward you for going upon or enacting of their will, and you'll be friends and colleagues, whatever, and respected members of the community that is different than the way that I am. On the other side of that is that you will have doors closed for you as well, so that if you ever wanted to go a specific way that was on your own, you will, in all reality, close your own doors because you wanted to go that particular direction. And to make this final note, believe it or not, I am not an introvert. I am actually an extrovert. My personality profile is ENTJ in Myers-Briggs, and the reason for that is this. I don't like people, but I am more of a mirror for the people around me. I get my energy from people. I am a real extrovert, not a gregarious sociophile. You guys can see this if you guys are familiar with my work, or if this is the first time you've seen me. Go explore what else, particularly when mask off. You'll notice that when I'm around certain people or I hear certain people, I don't have that much energy. I'm not really happy to be around them because I might not like them, and or I just don't operate on their wavelength. But there are other people that I very much do, and you can definitely see, usually when I'm around Osiris in particular, is that we have a very similar wavelength that reinforces each other, and it's one of those deals where it's just like, I kind of drink from the golden goose, if you will, to where, or drink from the golden fountain or whatever it was, that when I'm with Osiris, I get to be my realest self to a large degree, while also being comfortable and confident because I'm continually getting that energy. Excuse me, just as an aside here, I want to put out that, I adore Osiris and I love him because it's weird, and it broke a lot of molds for me in that Osiris has a completely different lived experience than I do. He's born, 12 years older than I am. Military brat, lived all over the world, literally, because growing up in the military. And yet we have such a similar viewpoint and mindset. And even though we don't have the exact same personality type, he's actually in the diplomatic types. We associate and we get along very well. And there's very few times where there's something that comes into conflict or difference. And even when we have some differences, we understand each other. We don't usually get into it where it's just like whatever. Just as a few other asides, I really get along with Connor very well too. Now lately that's kind of gotten a little bit more rocky. Nothing to say against Connor. What I'm getting here is that there are levels where we operate in a very similar way, that we have a lot in common personality wise, that we have a lot of the same goals, we have a lot of the same worldview, but when we do find a difference is that we are strong people of personality, that when we do come into conflict, when we do clash, is that it's quite sizable. And lately we've been seeing that a little bit more because of personal differences between where our ethical codes actually do line up and more of our ethical principles. And I'm not saying that he's wrong or he's a bad guy by any stretch. He has my most profound respect. What I'm getting at is, in a general sense there, you can see that, particularly in how I deal with Connor as a general sense, that you can see where I will feed off of that or when I will get fired up. And I'm usually a mirror that usually, or whenever we're there, is that if he's chill, I'm usually chill. And whenever he's getting fiery, I'm getting fiery. And you can see my extroverted tendencies fly off really well. Sorry to go off on that reside on the review, but I actually want to humanize this to a large degree because this is a very, very human character that Kreia is, and I absolutely adore what this character represents. But we talked about cruelty, right? And that's where we were originally on. And the problem with cruelty is that it innately leads to the path of destruction. And she actually, she does lean more towards the Sith teachings overall. Yes, there is. There very much is. She does warn about the path of destruction that the Sith do take up. And so we're going to start playing the clips for that.
This is what you have wrought. Countless murderers, slayers, assassins, born of war that has, as always, taught the wrong lesson. You showed them life without the Force, and instead of showing them truth, power, all you showed them was how the galaxy may die.
Okay, so that one doesn't have a lot of context to it, and I was really debating on if I was actually going to put this in here. This is a storyline where if you go down the hard dark side, and this is where you actually kill the Jedi Masters in the storyline, which is not the actual canon outcome. What it largely is that she shows that when you give into cruelty, when you give into hate, and you give into the ability to destroy, to swing the sword, you can have that power, and it makes you incredibly powerful, which she talked about in the Echoes of Cruelty. But on the other side of that is that eventually you get to a point where you just you are an engine for the universe to consume itself. Is that while you are a reflection of the universe, is that you actively destroy and you actively bring down everybody around you. There is a point where even looking after either yourself or you're looking after your own interests, you can harm everyone else to such a degree that everyone else is made lesser for it, and even you are made lesser for it. And that's something that she absolutely preaches. But I want to hit the other thing here real quick.
He is a breach in the Force, capable of consuming the lives of those around him. One cannot have power of that magnitude and still think and perceive the universe as we do, as most of us do. And it devours him as he devours others. His mere presence kills all around him, slowly feeding him. He is already dead. It is simply a question of how many he kills before he falls. Do not think of his power as one would a weapon, or one of your warships of the Republic. It is terrible, but it is still a subtle thing.
Okay, so yeah, there's a lot of detail to actually get into that. And of course, we're talking about a different character here that is within the game, and that is Nihilus. And Nihilus is kind of the other side of that. What happens as a NPC goes full dark side and becomes that. And this is not a reflection of you like the other post or the other recording was. This is a reflection of another character. Is that eventually Nihilus as a character becomes incredibly powerful, and the dark side is the quick and easier path to power because it is reinforcing the strength of oneself, which Kreia very much teaches, is that is the true path to power. But doing it to the degree that you just consume the power from everyone around you inevitably makes you a void within the universe itself. Is that you don't reflect what the universe gives into you. You only consume it. You degrade it. And so both of those posts largely reflect upon that. And I very much really I love that a lot because while she teaches her philosophy in the regards that you are powerful, that you do have the ability to be powerful and reflect that upon others, is that you can take it too far. You must see the true picture of who you are and what the abilities you have, and you must see the contrast between the good that you do and the bad that you do. And it really gets to the point where you do see in a lot of this, and it gets into my Loki review, which you can check out on this channel or the old channel, depending on when you're watching this, that sometimes there is a lot of instances where morality just goes to shit and you just have to make the definitive choices that either build people up or tear them down to meet a greater ends. And there's some things that Purple was getting into that I wanted to touch on, and I got to remember where it was. We talked about personal will, which was great. The application of your will is so great that we can't even comprehend all the consequences. And yes, absolutely it is. And I want to, we're going to be finishing that up as we get into the echoes of altruism. But most people don't really understand that influencing your will upon people can echo in eternity. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. All the penalties in the game are just as dense. I'm not going to say. Whenever I think of the subtext analysis, I always think that he was the horror vision of the exile on Corbin. Apathy is death. To a large degree, yes. Okay, so let's talk about the reverse of this. What happens when you live for others? You are altruistic, because cruelty is its own thing. But what is Kreia's thoughts on altruism and how that reflects upon the world itself?
Such kindnesses will mean nothing. His path is set. Giving him what he has not earned is like pouring sand into his hands. What if by surviving another day he brings a greater darkness upon another? The slightest push, the smallest touch, sends echoes throughout life. Even an act of kindness may have more severe repercussions than you know or can see. By giving him something he has not earned, perhaps all you have helped him become is a target. Seeing another elevated often brings the eyes of others who suffer. And perhaps in the end, all you have wrought is more pain. And that is my lesson to you. Be careful of charity and kindness, lest you do more harm with open hands than with a clenched fist.
There is a lot of subtext in with that one. And this is where a lot of people really reject Kreia and her teachings when it comes to altruism. And we're not done with altruism yet. But a lot of people have the problem with the fact that, you can actually do more harm with altruism? And the answer is yes. This is actually quite a lot of problems that I have with most people that consider themselves leftist politically, is that they seem to have this altruistic bend that does not reflect upon the personal struggles that people have. And there was some comments that Kreia had regarding this that I was trying to make out in absurds, but it just didn't work out. But as far as this is concerned, is that people have power, but they have to attain that power. And there's usually very few ways that they can do that. And that gets into the side of altruism that I'm going to let Kreia speak of it, and then I'll elaborate on it further.
If you seek to aid everyone that suffers in the galaxy, you will only weaken yourself and weaken them. It is the internal struggles, when fought and won on their own, that yield the strongest rewards. You stole that struggle from them, cheapened it. The currents of the galaxy, of nations, of peoples, may all stem from such small kindnesses. Every small weakness, small fracture that you create weakens the whole. If you care for others, Then dispense with pity and sacrifice, and recognize the value in letting them fight their own battles. And when they triumph, they will be even stronger for the victory.
Okay, so this pisses off a lot of people because, in a large degree, this is the mindset of what doesn't kill me makes me stronger, and that is something that absolutely offends people and drives them crazy because they don't believe that. There's a lot of suffering in the world, there's a lot of challenges, but in the greater sense, I think Kreia is absolutely right, is that people only become personally stronger to a large degree when they achieve what they want under their own volition. Now, not to say that you can't help people or shouldn't. We already talked about cruelty here, right? And that's why I actually tied cruelty first instead of altruism, is that you have to know the fine line. You have to know the difference. And there is one excerpt that I was trying to pull out, but I couldn't get it to make any kind of contextual sense, is what happens when you overtly try to push people in certain directions with cruelty or with altruism in certain ways. Is that she addressed it, is that you can make people weaker in both regards. You have to be incredibly careful of that overall balance. And so one of the things that she openly gets into, I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought a little bit, it's a little too early in the morning, is what she largely gets into, and the problem with altruism is that you have to have that fine line where you have to understand, and here's the lesson I was trying to get to that I couldn't excerpt. When you help people, you are helping them by making things easier for them, but you are not empowering them. That's not what this actually does. And this is where I hate pretty much most people when it comes to economic policy, and what happens to a lot of these things is that they're like, hey, we got to help everybody because, this person's hungry, this person's having this person doesn't have a home, and I understand that. But giving people the things they do not have and that they have not earned does not equip them to deal with the universe. It makes them rely upon your strength and what you have. Now, if you have the ego, if you will, or the love, if you will, to do that, I'm not going to fault you for that. But do not ever tell me or pertain to me that you have made this person better. You have not. Because the moment that you are gone, or the moment that the institution is gone, or the moment that people are gone, that person is shut out of luck. And there's a greater narrative here that I'm sure that everyone's going to want to get into me is like, oh, we're social creatures. We all rely on each other. Of course we are. I'm not saying that we all need to just say, you know what, you do your own thing. That's not tenable, right? Like somebody is using the power to power my computer right now, like is making that. I have to rely on you. What I'm advocating for is that when we go out in the world, we have the ability to look after our own interests and use our own interests to propagate ourselves, but also make each other better. And that's the greater picture that Kreia is trying to get at, is that you can rely on others. There's nothing wrong with that. But make sure that when you're relying upon others is that you are not inherently weakening yourself. So when somebody says, hey, here's $50, go feed yourself or whatever, is that going to help you or is that going to hurt you? Because do you need that drive? Do you need that compunction of feeling hungry to put yourself in the right place, in the right time, to not be hungry anymore? And this is a conversation that gets really into meta ethics, it's really spicy, especially here on Twitch, but I firmly believe it, is that you don't have to say no to help. You don't have to say that help is bad. You can absolutely help people, but for the person that is the helper, recognize that you are helping person or somebody else on your own strength, and that it is not reflective of their strength, it's reflective of yours, and you haven't made them better. And that is the thing that really pisses me off about a lot of people. You aren't making people better by helping them, more often than not. There's a side note to that. The other side of that, if you are the helped, is that if you are going to be helped, use that help to increase yourself, okay? Giving somebody a meal usually isn't going to help them that much. It's very, very temporary. Giving somebody an education, on the other hand, is very much something that will help somebody for all of their life. And that is the difference. And of course, this gets into investments and economics, and we call this return of investment. The problem that I have politically or morally with so many people across the board is that when it comes to the way that people want to help people, is that they're far too focused on the short term, the immediate inner goal gain, and not something that is long term that will build people up for a lifetime. And if anyone's familiar with my politics, they've largely seen that. I'm super critical of the vast majority of the things that we do when it comes to our social welfare. I'm an economically liberal person. I want to spend the big checks to help people with education and on many areas, with education and infrastructure, and maybe even healthcare to a large degree, because I think most people can't afford it. But I don't like things like Social Security and food stamps and all these other things that literally just trap people and either don't help anyway because it's not really an investment, it's just something to appease people, or something that doesn't necessarily help because it has no long-term game at all. And as soon as that program would die, it would go over. And we'll put it this way. If you want my philosophy in a nutshell politically, is that if I give people an education system and I kill it tomorrow, anyone who has gone through that education system is still going to have the benefits for years and decades on to come. If I have that for an infrastructure program, if I stop fixing the roads tomorrow, those roads are still going to be there for years upon years. They'll degrade over time, but you can still use them. If I stop giving you food tomorrow, that lasts what, 12 hours? You're fucked. Healthcare is kind of weird like that, but it's one of those ones that's kind of in the middle. And so, I'm sorry to make this overly political, but I have to tag it, is that a lot of the things that we do not reflect upon personal growth and actually helping people. It's appeasing people and making their lives more comfortable, not making their lives better. And I will die on that hill, is that we don't actually have a society that is built upon building people up. It's about making people happier or more content or satisfied, and that's not the way to go about this in any way, shape, or form. So, without further ado, I'm going to hit, Purple's comments, and then we'll get into the final notes lessons that I have here. It's not to say that unjust suffering and capitalism is cool. It's to be highly aware of the help that you choose to give. Absolutely. And you have it on that. It's give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish. 100%. And that's the thing that I'm 100% behind on, is that if you're teaching people, if you're giving people fish, you fed them for a day. You teach them to fish, you fed them for a lifetime. And that's what I'm more concerned about, is that I'm tired of hearing all these policies and prescriptions that don't build people up. It simply just appeases them for the day. This is pretty much what any good educational system has: hard tests at the end of an instruction block. Knowing that you are capable to overcome the obstacle is highly distinct and different from removing obstacles altogether. It's one of those weird things that I agree and disagree with that. And again, greater picture here is that the problem with a good education system is that when it comes to tests, is that the tests are a means to end in their own regard. If you try to teach people what you're teaching them, is that are you teaching them the lesson they need to know, or are you teaching them to beat the test? In a lot of regards, that's the problem with education systems around the world, is that they don't teach people lessons, they teach people to beat the tests. And sometimes that's more metagame than others. And you can obviously see where that is more poignant than it is not. But in a general sense here, having obstacles is something we definitely need. Having some kind of test or aptitude process is absolutely needed. But on the other side of that is that we have to be very careful that when we put a barrier in for somebody to show that they have demonstrated that they have learned the lesson, that it shows that they've actually learned the lesson and not tried to beat the test. And that's really always hard. It's incredibly hard. And that is why education needs so much of a, not necessarily a focal lens, but it needs a lot of thought, diligence, and respect. And you need people that are incredibly intelligent and incredibly gifted and incredibly willful to be teachers. Teachers need to be people that are revered and respected as doctors and not the other way around. Education may be even more important than having somebody operate on you. That's a hot take to some degree. Okay, cool. So we're getting into final lessons. Let's talk about what you do with those echoes. What we've talked about in the events, that you can be altruistic, you can be cruel, You have to realize the greater whole for what it is. But what does Kreia have to say about manipulating others, in particular the public at large? Is what happens when you influence the people around you. And so we'll hit that.
From one act can come tremendous power when the echo has traveled as far as it can. Send a great echo, and power will come to you. It is only from such small things, from such critical points, that the universe and its masses may be moved. It requires that one be able to feel the critical point within the fractured mass, and know how to strike it in such a way that the echoes travel to your intended destination. The ability to fool the minds of others, to dominate them on a massive scale that you speak of, is not achieved best through raw power. Manipulation is done through propelling events, or selected ones, into motion. It is done through teaching, through example, and through conviction. And the greatest of victories are not manipulations at all, but simply awakening others to the truth of what you believe, of hearing it echoed around you in life.
Yeah, that's a lot. And you can tell I had to do a lot of editing for that one. That one was quite a bit of a pain. So there's like 3 general lessons there that are in this. Number 1 is that you do have the ability to affect other people, and that is largely in the echoes that we already talked about. But there is the slightest touch, the slightest pull, inexorably moves people in certain directions, and that can echo within eternity. The other side of that is that when you get into dealing with many, many people, is that you are, she puts manipulating, I think it's more of like convincing people that you have a way that is greater than other people, right? That the things that they have been told may be true, maybe not be true, but it is basically convincing people and showing through reality that if you are correct, that in reality this is an undeniable truth, that what you believe is innately true, and that if you do not contend with it, reality will come to bite you in the ass. And that is why I advocate politically like what I do. Is that I think I've got a pretty good understanding of what things are and how they actually work. And while I advocate things that people do not appreciate or do not respect, especially if they have a different moral codes than I do, my morality, I think, is largely my morality and my principles. Again, morality is kind of a joke. But more of my principles and my worldview are built upon the realities that we do face. Power is a pain in the ass, and it will lead people to do horrible things. We're about to talk about that. But in a general sense, is that when we use power, we have a duty to use it in a certain way. And the reason why is that while I do not necessarily give morality an overall shield of, there's absolute goods and absolute evils or any of that, what I do think is that because of the consequences, we need principles that are reflective of the world around us, and that there are certain lines we do not cross because of the fact that we will literally just destroy anything and everything around, or anything and everyone around us. And the other side of that is that we can't cross other lines, because in the event of trying to just make the world a better place, we could fuck it all up, because people are using the power. True. People are using the power of others, but they do not realize it, and they mistake it for the power of themselves. And when it comes to that time where they go out into the world and they must assert themselves into the world, they are quickly beaten back and destroyed, or what have you, because they are not equipped. And so, getting into purple, the Army really knows how to teach. Field training exercises will test you. That's very possible. I don't know. I've not been an active member of the DoD. Ethics are important, y'all. Absolutely. I don't care for moral teachings more often than not, of like religion and whatnot. I understand them, but some of them are kind of ethical principles. Ethical understanding is far more of a concern for me, because it is the self-examination of why we have these moral claims. And some of them we can validate. I'm like, hey, the golden rule, treat others the way you want to be treated, makes a lot of ethical sense, because basically, if you want, it's reflected in both science and what we call the second law of motion, which is, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, or in the Eastern religions we call this karma. Is that what goes around comes around, right? And so the golden rule not only makes sense religiously, but it also makes sense ethically, and is that be careful of the actions that you commit, because Be careful of the actions that you commit, because they can come around and they can reward you, but they can also hurt you. And I think that makes all the sense in the world. There's some of these things that morally, though, that don't make sense. Is that, just openly being good to other people isn't being good to people. And that's something that I'm hardly against, or I'm very hard against, but I've talked about that quite a bit. Another one is just, don't eat pork, don't work on Sunday, all this other stuff. These aren't moral axioms. They're just, traditions. And these traditions, ethically, have very little reality to them. We can make arguments to say, okay, having this is ridiculous. There's usually, I think, some method within the madness. Example, don't work on Sunday. As an example, I don't think it's Sunday that's important. I don't think that's the actual ethical principle behind it. I think the ethical principle is, dude, take a damn break. Don't work every day. Do not burn yourself out. Give yourself time. Give your family time to rest, to recuperate, and more importantly, to be around other people. So eat pork is the base. I think a lot of the other traditions, don't eat pork, don't eat meat, Lent, all these other things, probably had something to do with some bad things that happened back in the day regarding, hey, don't eat pork because if you don't cook pork right, it'll fuck you up. Don't eat, certain things because if you don't right, it'll screw you up. In a general sense, I think a lot of these older things have a lot of traditions that are based in reality, but they didn't convey over into actual practical reasons. They're just like, don't do it. And so ethically, they were moral axioms, but now ethically, they don't really make any sense. And objectively, they don't make any sense. Okay. You're not going to get me on the vegan part. But to wrap this up, we're going to talk about power. And Kreia has quite a bit of conversations about strength and power. And here's the contrast between the power that you have. And I'm quite interested to see what you think about this.
It is said that the Force has a will. It has a destiny for us all. I wield it, but it uses us all, and that is abhorrent to me, because I hate the Force. I hate that it seems to have a will, that it would control us to achieve some measure of balance when countless lives are lost.
The Force can drive others, but there is still choice, is there not?
Ah, but at what point does the power the Force exerts submerge any attempt at choice or free will?
Okay, so a little bit of editing I had to do in that one, but I think you guys might be getting where I'm going. Subtract the Force for power. The power that each person has, the power that individuals have. In the storyline, the Force is a greater power. The Force is a greater power, but it is power nonetheless. And the problem is that she openly shows, as the contrast, is that power is wonderful. Power to put your will into practice is wonderful. But power inexorably is a problem because it serves its own end. Power, it's the old principle. Power corrupts absolutely, or absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? I think everyone, I don't need to explain this to a large degree without everyone, realizing where I'm going with this, is that power is something not only to respect and admire, but it's also something to fear and maybe even hate. Is that power inexorably ends up leading people to serving power to a degree that is absolutely abhorrent and disgusting. How many people go about and you see people use power in the most abominable of ways that is no way, ethical or decent? And it's not even, for me, I'm going to take shots at everybody here. It's both people that use it for good and evil ends, but also for those that just use it for unethical ends. This is my major issue with people who are altruists, that want to go about and help people out. And I'm just taking shots at you because I hate you. Is that the people that are just like, I want to make the world a better place. You don't use power worth a shit. And you generally make the world a worse place, in my overall opinion. And it drives me absolutely insane when dealing with people like this. Most of the time is that power begets power. And you're not going to make the world a better place. And more often or not, we talked about this to a large degree in the Loki review. Definitely check that out. Is that when you use power, you are deciding who is helped and who is not. And there is very, very few times where you help the majority of people, let alone the plurality of people. is that more often than not, when you have power, you have the ultimate lesson of Loki, or of Loki season 1, you have the ability to affect power and affect change and help those that you want to help, but it's always at the cost of other people. It is always at the cost of somebody else. And more often than not, and something that we have to critically examine, again, watch the Loki review, is if the universe is actually so twisted that the vast majority of the time, when we decide that we want to help someone or others, that we will categorically fuck over the majority of other people. And that is something that people really need to think about, because a lot of these altruistic people tend to think that, this very limited ways of helping people that they are going about doesn't have any negative repercussions. And I think that it actually absolutely does, and they do not contend with the gravity of that. Now, to shoot people on my side that are far more of the, like the Nietzschean master philosophy kind of people, where you have to go out and assert yourself. Our side has to be very careful about the power that we use when we affect our will, because if we want to say, better that I make the choice than other people, that's something to be respected. I'm largely on board with this, but the thing is, we have to be very careful that when we openly side with one person over another, that we're not openly opening the doors to damnation for the people that we didn't side with. There has to be a balance. There has to be a greater respect for the people that we consider the antithesis or the rival, or even worse, the enemy. Of course, people know, I think to some degree, where I lie on this. People that are the antithesis are fine. They need to be there. They need to have people that keep you in check. People that are rivals are those with strength that are to be respected. That those who are, who are rivals are worthy adversaries, if you will. It's enemies that people really don't get along with me on. Is that once I'm willing to consider you're an enemy, it doesn't matter what the moral or ethical repercussions. You are no longer somebody that should be tolerated. That should be. We don't worry about what your livelihood is anymore. That's the point where I get a lot of people upset with me. Is that when I have the power to do something, if I openly decide that you are no longer worth dealing with, that we will do anything I will do anything within my power to destroy you as a functional entity, and I have that power to do so, and I will use it. My principles is to evaluate where people get into that category, and it's something that is very few and far between, and for good reason, because taking out the sword is incredibly destructive and can absolutely make the world worse around you. And that is Kreia's critical lesson towards people that are more like me, that definitely fall in this category, is we have to be careful about when we take out the sword, that we hit our intended target and not a bunch of people that are just in the crossfire. And that's how you get moral crusaders in a nutshell, is that, hey, we're off on this great crusade to end the evildoers, and we end up taking out everyone associated with them, and that's not good. That doesn't do any ramifications for the betterment of the world itself. We will tear down people we'll tear down the innocent. We'll tear down people that necessarily aren't involved in our particular squabble, in the event of trying to hit the people that we particularly want to hit. And there is a greater logic in there that we have to be careful of. It's a trap that I fall in all honesty, quite often. Particularly, as an example, how I wanted to do with Cuba is that, just as an example, I definitely advocated that we need to maintain the embargo on Cuba because it may empower the authoritarians within Cuba. But does that mean that I'm not hurting the average Cuban citizen too? I openly acknowledge I am. And the question is that, am I actively tearing down people to keep the people that I don't want from getting better? Or am I just simply doing a greater harm than I am a good? And I don't know the actual answer to that, to truthfully. There is a level of scale where I have to look at this as not a mass human means, but a means of institution versus an institution. Is that I am not looking at this on the average American citizen versus the average Cuban citizen. I'm looking at this as the American institution versus the Cuban institution. And that basically when it gets to a level, is that the scale of me and you, or the scale of me and the Cuban citizen, no longer matters. It is the scale of the greater whole. And so, at least in a general sense, is that What I'm trying to get is not my particular politics on this, but the ramifications of those politics and how it reflects the world upon a greater whole and how I contextualize that. And so I'm sure a lot of people are going to want a lot to say about what I've had to say here. And so if you want to have these conversations with me, definitely welcome to contact me and we can put something together for Mask Off. Because I do one-on-one conversations, and I do group chats over particular issues such as this, whether this policy is the right thing to do, or what is the moral thing here, or what is the the good, or what is the ramifications. And so, in a general sense, I know I've been a little bit contrary because I talk about doing things moral, but it's more of a framework and not the actual way that I view it. And we can definitely talk about that. So to finish this out. Lefties are just as brainwashed and blind as righties. In the Kreia sense, they will let the will of progressivism or conservatism subvert their own. Hell yes! I have talked about this very, very much and consistently with the political flip-flopping that we've seen, where people say that they want this, and then they flip, and they're openly going, nah, well, that guy did it, so fuck that. A great example is Afghanistan. We just pulled out of Afghanistan during this recording. That was last month. And the right's pissed off at Biden. Most of the right said, America first. We don't want this shit. We don't want to be involved in the rest of the world anymore. Or we don't want nearly as much to do with it. No more wars. Let's get out of the wars. And now Biden does it, and he's the bad guy. Fuck you. God damn it. These people can piss off. These are people that are not being principally consistent, ideologically consistent, and they are letting the will of others subvert their own, and it pisses me off to no end. It's stupid. So without further ado, I have been Tyberius D, and this has been the review of Kreia that I am absolutely proud of, and I am going to promo the ever-living shit out of this when it goes up on YouTube, because I am very proud of this episode, and I'm very happy with this episode. And I hope that as many people see this as possible. This is my favorite review to date, and I'm glad that I put so much time into this. But before I close out, I've got to say, and please don't leave on this note, I put a lot of time and a lot of effort into this particular review, and I'm trying to do that more for the shows that I'm doing because I want to give you guys a quality content. However, there's two problems with this. Number one is that the reason I do have this time is because while I'm doing a school and work and this, my work hours have been cut drastically slow because it's just part of a slow season, which is unseasonably what's going on. Like, it should be picking up right now. It is not. And I'm trying to make income where I can get by. But if you guys want to help me, you can help me on Twitch. You can help me through PayPal, which is a donation link down below. Or just think of it as a tip. Or you can help me on Patreon. We finally got our first patron just the other day. And thank you, Sam Drizzy, for that. And I'm going to shout out for anyone who is watching that I have the patrons so far that are my community overall. Fawnor, Andy Wagner, The West Dude, Julia, Ron Cleveland, Drew, Ace Man, Kamikaze, Samantha, Leah, Revolt Rise, and Shadow Fox have all been contributed to me in some way or form, whether it's on Twitch, whether it's through PayPal donations, what have you. You guys have been absolutely fantastic, and I thank you so much. And so, if you're one of these people that have been thinking about it to pull the trigger, if you have the ability, if you really like the content that I'm making, please, for the love of decency, give me a hand, because I can't do this without more help, especially something of this quality and character. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go find another damn job. So, give me a hand if you could. Really appreciate it. And without further ado, this has been Reviews with Tyberius D, and we'll catch you next time. Have a good one, guys.